everyone. Welcome to the Aeon 14 podcast. My name is James S. Aaron, and I'm joined by the Aeon 14 team, including our illustrious leader, Michael Cooper. We'll be talking about all things Aeon 14, from the books, the science behind the series, the ideas, the cool stuff, the kick-ass stuff, and whatever else readers want to hear about. So let us know in the Facebook group or shoot Michael an email. On board today, we've got Jenny Green, who writes as JJ Green, Lisa Richmond, Michael Cooper, and me. At least I think I'm here. To celebrate the launch of the latest Aeon 14 story, Carthage, today we're going to get to know Jenny better. We've also got some reader questions around the Aeon 14 publishing process and advice for writers. And I've got some advice, hard-earned, painful advice that doesn't all involve drinking. That's a joke. Nobody laughs. Okay. But before we get into all that, let's have some updates from Michael. So, Michael.
All right. So obviously just this last Thursday, Carthage came out. It's on sale right now in the US and UK for 99 cents and will be until Thursday, August 3rd, 2nd? Dates are hard. When you're a writer, just every day just blurs together, especially during summer. Thank you, Lisa. Especially during summer vacation because there's no taking the daughter to school, so it's just all the days blur. So that's happening. And then on August 9th, we'll have the release of the Proteus Bridge, which is the series of prequel. It started out as two prequel novellas that James wrote and turned into this really, I think it's hard to say if it's the best Sentience War story or not. Because I think if you've read all the other ones, it has so many connections that excite you and interest you, and you're like, oh, that's why that happened. If it's someone read it first, it may just be as good as the other Sentience Wars novels. Although it's really hard to beat the fifth one.
It's a very different tone, I think. It was like, because they're written for the Pew Pew anthologies, which were, funny, they're a lot lighter, I think, than the rest of the series.
They are, but there's deep stuff in there too. Like, you weren't afraid. One of the things you do, James, is you're not afraid to really, really hone in on human suffering. Which a lot of us, the other books don't. We write more popcorny, and or in the case of Tanis, there's very little human suffering because they all have the ability to not have it. Being so far to a post-scarcity society. But yeah, I think it was fantastic. I think I really like reading it. I don't think I possess the ability to do it that well to write about animals, but I think you do, and I love reading about animals. So I think Proteus Bridge would be really cool in that respect. And then following that, we will have Proxima Centauri, Lisa's opus that she's been working on. We keep talking about making it shorter, and then it keeps getting longer.
Is it correct that it's going to be a 2-book series? I was thinking it was going to be 3 books, but it's a duology.
It's going to be an N book series.
Oh, 10. Okay, because currently it says
I said N.
N.
Okay, N. That's better.
Yeah. Was there something that made you think it was only 2 books long?
I think on Amazon it says 2-book series right now, but that might just be because there are only 2 books.
Yeah, the way Amazon does that is they
right.
actually make a new product for every iteration of the series.
Interesting.
Which is really annoying because if someone actually reviews the series and then you add another book to the series, you lose your reviews on the series. Well, half the time you do. So half the time they transfer, half the time they don't. So I actually keep an eye on my series reviews, and anytime I add a book to a series, the reviews don't come along. I tell Amazon because they actually give it what they call an Amazon serial. ASIN, I forget what it stands for. That's that sort of number code you see in the URL for every book, and they give a new one for every iteration of the series. It's kind of annoying because you can't tell Amazon, like, hey, it's going to be a 12-book series. So it always looks like it's complete, even when there's still more books to come. But yeah, like Lisa and my plan at present, and it's a little bit nebulous past Tau Ceti. We're going to kind of see where it goes. But, I mean, in theory, we're following Jason and Terrence, who are the people that launched the Intrepid effectively. And this story starts, sort of the roots of the story are in the time of the Sentience Wars. So this thing that Lisa's writing could take us pretty much all the way from the Sentience Wars all the way up to Outsystem.
Okay.
No pressure.
Well, because I saw it, like, how is this gonna? I mean, a duology actually is, I think, a really interesting. Like, you see those in science fiction quite a bit, or I shouldn't say that. You don't see them a lot, and the ones that I've read, I've really liked. So I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. And as I was reading Proxima, was like, wait, how are we going to do this? but no. Okay. Well, I feel better.
That would be why. Or not. Yeah.
Yeah. Just sort of to give people a little tease as well. Tau Ceti is going to be about what happens when using nano goes wrong.
Oh yeah.
Because there's a lot of the stuff further in the future is like they've solved most of the problems. Nano is ubiquitous and no one really worries about it because they've learned how to deal with most of the problems, just like we've learned how to deal with 70,000 volt power lines hanging over heads all the time. Very rarely does this cause an issue, but it used to cause a lot of problems. Same sort of, that's a bad example, but you get the picture. Or pipes. We used to make them out of lead. Now we've learned that lead is a bad thing to make pipes out of. We've done better. So this is back when we were making pipes out of lead in nano land, and then things go wrong. But yeah, in theory, what's really happening, and you guys are going to get a picture of, is Alpha Centauri during that time frame. There was no interstellar trade. There was, you would send some people to a colony world, and for all intents and purposes, they were on their own. Everything that's going on in the Sentience Wars at that period, when you're reading about the list of books, Alpha Centauri has been settled for 500 years, which is a pretty long time if you think about it. That's about as long as the time span after the European expansion on planet Earth. So think about everything that's happened since Columbus set sail, and that's that's the time frame that people have lived on Alpha Centauri already. And there are many colonies like this at this point. There's probably about 7 or 8 of them that have been settled for close to that long, but they're all completely isolated. But something that happens with Enfield, Enfield sort of keeps cropping up and everything's going on, is that Enfield works out better ways to do interstellar travel and to manage the process of spending 60, 70 years on a starship to go from place to place. So we're effectively going to get to see that, see sort of the genesis of all of this in those books. Following that is we're going to have Fallen Empire will be out on the 23rd, and then on the 30th we'll have Coco Crush and Tanis Richards Operative. And Lisa I was flailing. I had no idea what to do with. I mean, I know that I wanted to have Tanis Richards. I want to sort of show like her early missions where she's actually working as a counterintelligence agent, and I was sort of flailing at it. And Lisa's like, I have an idea, and so I think that's what we're going to go with. And we're going to get to go to an entirely new place in the Sol system that we've never gone before. It's going to be freaking amazing. And then just 1 week after that, God willing, I'm going to have Tanis Richards' Blackest Night out as well. And then there's more stuff coming in September. There's the next Perilous Alliance book, and also in very beginning of October is going to be the next Perseus Gate book, and there'll be other ones in there as well. I just don't have the pre-orders up yet. And then other things is the where'd it go? I have stuff here. I brought props.
Some folks might wonder now, which didn't one get pushed recently? Was it the second Taylor?
Death Mark, which is the second book in the Hands Assassin series, which follows Nadine follows Narishka and soon Nadine and whatnot. That one is going to actually end up happening out in October. Okay. We weren't able to get it ready in time, but I got the for the Outsystem album. I have the hold up to the cameras. You guys can see it better. Oop, there we are. Here's where the camera's aimed. It's a little bit tricky. This is the CD version of the Outsystem album that I got made. This was also a chore too because they. I guess not too. You guys didn't hear a prior conversation, but they had an error actually on their website for getting the disc art done. So it took me a while to get the disc art up, but I got that now too. So it's super swanky and everything. So that's out on Amazon now. You can buy it for $15, or you can buy the digital only version on the Etsy store. And I've got a giant whack of books on the Etsy store that are available now. And if there's anything anybody wants signed that's not up on the Etsy store yet, just let me know because I have almost everything. In my grubby hands right now. It just takes a while to get it all up on there because I'm trying to write these books as well that I'm supposed to be doing. The art book is a little bit delayed. It's going to be coming out hopefully in like a week or two if I can manage. I've actually got 2 different printers they're going to do. One's going to be doing the glossy, one's going to be doing the non-glossy. And the ones doing the non-glossy is like I'm going to break up the hives here pretty soon trying to deal with them, but because their restrictions for how everything prints are really annoying. And I also got like fun stuff too that I'm going to be at a signing convention on the 11th in Orlando that I mentioned, and I'm going to have some swag here. So I've got like these bookmarks that folks can get. I've got Tanis Richards' Outer Space postcard, which actually I realized apparently I've been using that a bunch. It's actually a chapter name in Rika Infiltrator as well, Kicking Ass in Outer Space. And I actually made like a real postcard too. I've got this tennis. You have one job. I think you guys know the one job meme. If this is just me that knows this meme or not, but and it's actually a real postcard on the back too, so you can actually mail that.
I think people know that meme.
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. Sometimes I wonder. I mean,
so wait, what's the convention that you're heading to? Is there a website for that?
Yeah, it's called Indie Convention, or it's called Indie Book Fest, but their website is indieconvention.com. It's in Orlando, Florida, at the St. Mary Weston at 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock on Saturday, August 11th. So I'll be there scribbling. The banner behind me will be there, tennis in all of her glory. So if you're walking around looking for me, you'll see her, and that'll be me. I think that's everything's going on right now. Oh,
you want to mention Dragon Con and the or Dragon Awards? Dragon Awards.
Dragon Awards.
Oh, the Dragon Awards. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. I'll mention it. If any of you guys have a book that you want of Michael's that you want to enter into the Dragon Awards, it's open from, correct me if I'm wrong, August 1st through the 20-something?
August 1st till the 31st. I think it's the whole month.
To the 31st. Yeah, so it's a whole month.
The whole month.
You do have to go and register, and it's actually it's on the Facebook fan page, all the information, the link to it. Or if you just Google Dragon Awards, it should come up. You do have to pre-register, but then they'll send you the ballot and you can fill it out.
Yeah, and definitely, if you do that, let us know in the Facebook group, because it'd be great just to remind everyone, that that's out there. So,
yeah, I know I'm usually pretty good at shameless self-promotion. As an independent author, that's something you kind of get used to.
I'm not. I can promote Michael, but I can't promote myself.
I know. I feel the same way.
It's just for whatever reason with awards, I feel that I'm like, you give me your money for books. Because I feel like in that respect, I'm giving you something. I'm giving you this 8 to 10 hours.
Goods, yeah.
And you're giving me a little bit of money. But awards is kind of like, I don't know, it just feels different. It feels like I'm asking for something and not giving anything.
The Dragon Award is a fan award, so it's like really, if we just get people to sign up and get your friends to sign up, and that's kind of what it's about. So,
and independent authors can win. Last year, Richard Fox won for Dragoons. I forget exactly what category he won in, but he won a significant category for Dragoons.
Best military science fiction, and then Jonathan Brazee, I think, has been nominated, or did he?
He's been nominated, yeah.
He's been nominated, yeah. I mean, just be nominated is great. And that's why being a fan award, like anybody, once you sign up, can nominate. And so if we just get enough nominations, we'll get Michael on the ballot. And that's a cool thing as it is. Like, it's great for visibility. And
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worth it for visibility alone. Just that way, people who have not heard of the Aeon 14 books will now hear of it. So it could potentially open it up to all these fun stories, up to a whole new host of people. So go nominate.
We're going to have, Jen is going to make it in just a moment here, I believe. So we'll have her popping in any moment too.
Awesome.
Oh, okay.
And there's one thing, I was going to mention something crazy. I may be the only person that gets this, but I'm going to get the OutSystem album produced in vinyl as well.
No way.
Yeah. Because I'm a huge nerd, so.
Yeah, but no, the art is going to look great. That'll be really cool.
Yeah, the art is going to look pretty awesome in vinyl. And I've actually, I don't know if I'm ever going to make the money back from all this music stuff, but I like it so much. I'm actually going to get Sonata and Scribe. They're going to, the main composer is going to read each of the books. He actually likes Aeon 14 quite a bit, and he's going to do a song per book as well over time. So eventually this music library will continue to grow, which I think is pretty neat.
Well, you know what? The one positive with the vinyl is that the vinyl is a lot easier to open, the shrink wrap around.
That's true. Shrink wrap on vinyl is way easier than shrink wrap. And I don't understand why. Like, they're more fragile than CDs. CDs have a plastic case around them. Why do they have to? It was when I was doing it, I'm like, I have not missed this at all when I was trying to get it.
Yeah.
Because it didn't have the little pull tabby bit. And of course, the little pull tabby bit never works anyway, right? It like rips off and it never doesn't actually pull the thing. Good morning, Jen.
Good morning, Jen.
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Oh, good. We can hear you. Okay. I love the idea of a series like Aeon 14 having a vinyl release. Like, to me, that's like Soviet Russia, going to Mars with, vacuum tubes and whatnot.
And a cosmonaut.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I still, speaking of my favorite Soviet Russia story is is that when the first Russian capsules were sent up into space, America was working on like these ceramics that could handle the pressures and the heat and everything like that for the bottom of our capsules. The first Russian reentry vehicles had plywood bolted on the bottom.
And
it worked.
It did?
Yeah, the plywood worked.
I was also just reading though about like one of the most horrific, one of the huge problems during the space race was just lack of, communication, and how we kept repeating mistakes the Russians had already figured out when they, blew up. Like there was a pressurization issue where a suit expanded on a cosmonaut and he couldn't get back in the capsule. And so he had to actually bleed pressure off his suit. And then the exact same thing happened with the US astronauts. And then they blew up a rocket on the pad for some reason that we later, figured out. And also the high oxygen environments. I digress, but this was like really fascinating to me how the Cold War inhibited our ability to share information around,
Oh, yeah. Don't get me started about that, because my dad was in charge of flight safety for the Apollo program. So, I mean, I heard him.
I'm sure.
All that. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Lisa has a really good article up that we should link to about her father. That it's a bit of a tearjerker, but
totally.
It's a really good article about her father and what he did in the space race.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lisa is she's like a natural born sci-fi writer. She's in her genetic code. There was one other thing. Oh yeah, and I was just about. Oh, carry on this thread if you have something else.
Nope. I was just gonna. If you're gonna talk about the card game, that's what I was gonna mention.
I was gonna talk about. I know the rules for Snark. I have to make a couple of changes. I probably will have to make a couple of changes. I mean, when you play test something, it's always. It never works out the way you think it will. But
we also have Jen is our resident game expert, so she's going to make sure it's squared away.
Yeah. Jen and I are actually going to start out we're going to play some games over Zoom, which is a software we're using right now just to see how it goes, and we'll actually get the rules for Snark out. Snark will work with regular playing cards, but I'm also going to make some playing cards that are actually going to be Aeon 14 branded, because I really can't imagine people 7,000 years in the future playing with kings and queens and jacks and aces. I think they're going to play.
I think they could. I
mean, some of them might, but I think.
How old are dice? How old are dice?
Well, that's a good point. But I just feel like they might have different types of cards.
Yeah.
Although poker does still exist in Aeon 14 in the Death Dealer book. There's actually is there for a poker tournament, and there actually was a whole chapter about the poker tournament, but we took it out because it didn't fit. But they were actually playing poker. But the Aeon 14 cards we're just gonna replace them like with binary stars and novas and stuff like that for some of the bigger things. I think that'd be kind of cool.
That'd be cool.
So yeah, there'll actually be Aeon 14 regular playing cards, and then I am working on a collectible card game as well. Because not lately. I haven't played Magic that much lately, but back when I used to work at this one job that was still with Magic the Gathering fans, we would almost every night play for like an extra 2 hours after work. So I have about 25,000 Magic cards. I'm a giant nerd.
Speaking of cards, talk about the collectible card or the the Google Doc. Yeah.
Oh well, so that's another thing. I am going to make sort of like collectible character cards that aren't part of any game, and there's a Google Doc that we'll link to. Where people can actually suggest cards, and it'll be like, and there could be like multiple Tannis ones, be like some sort of attribute of Tannis, picture of Tannis, and a quote or something like that. So I'm going to put out some of those as well for people that don't want to play card games or anything like that, just want some cool swag. So we'll link to the doc.
There should be a parrot card and an uplifted dog card and an uplifted cat card.
There could be. I think we should have. Mr. Fizzlewort, is that the name of the cat from Perilous Alliance? I can never remember his name. There was the name that
Fizzlepop.
Fizzlepop, that's what it was. Yeah, because Bub said his name was Charles or something like that until suddenly we realized Bubs was lying about the name and he was Fizzlepop. And of course, this thing will be like, "Hey asshole, where's my tuna?"
And of course, there has to be one of Yusuf in a thong.
No. I
think Jenny traumatized some folks. We got to talk about that.
Yusuf in a thong will probably look like.
How's that for a segue?
I would say he probably just looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger posing at a bodybuilder show, though.
Probably.
Yeah. I think that's good idea. Good description.
Yeah, I mean, he's not like some biker with a beer belly hanging over, or anything like that. Yusuf is going to be pretty chiseled.
Mm-hmm.
Anything new with Patreon before we leave the updates?
Patreon. I always thought it was Patreon, but
I just want to say Patreon. It's fun to say.
Okay, you say Patreon. I guess it's allowed.
I say Patreon.
Every time I see it, I think of Patronus. So I don't know.
Yeah, but Jenny, you're British. You say everything different. It's okay.
Oh, hold on. No, I say Patreon. I say Patreon. Yeah.
I'm messing with everybody. I'm just going to pronounce it.
We have no idea how to say this word anymore.
It's patron.
I've actually none of the patrons have mentioned it, but I did. Everybody who's on Patreon, who pays $5 a month more, actually gets a. Are you laughing at me because I don't know how to say it anymore? Thanks.
Because you emphasized it.
I didn't mean
I have to reinforce it in my mind.
Yeah.
Patreon.
Patreon. Anyway, they get $5 off anything on Etsy. I made a coupon code for them, and I've got like half the wallpapers up there now. Everybody who's any level of patron on Patreon gets all the cover art wallpapers, and they're in 8K quality. Just in case anybody ever gets an 8K monitor, you're going to be all set. So that's there. And I'm going to be backfilling all the Rika books because the first 2 Rika books actually aren't up there. But everybody who's on Patreon at the $5 a month level gets all the Rika books for free, and they'll get the Empire books for free and the Soul Dissolution books for free as well when they come out. So that's another sort of a little perk you get over there. I think that's it.
Cool.
Ready for a topic of discussion now.
We are. So today we're going to talk to Jenny about just writing in general and also Carthage. We've been talking about Carthage quite a bit, but I think it's also fun just to get to know you, and because you have a series of your own, right? And you've been writing fiction for several years. Am I correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want to just maybe give us a kind of your bio, and then we can branch off from there, like how you started with writing, and what your path has been so far?
Okay, so just briefly, I'm obviously British, you can tell from my accent, but I've travelled around a fair bit. I've been writing science fiction for about 10 years, and then I started to self-publish about 3 years ago, and I have actually 4 series. I have 2 completed series and 2 more series that are on the go at the moment. And obviously I'm also writing in Michael's universe in the colonization of New Canaan, which is really exciting.
So why science fiction? Have you written other genres, or has it always been science fiction?
It's actually always been science fiction, and I think that's because I always read science fiction and fantasy as a teenager, as a young kid. I could probably write in other genres too, but science fiction has always been the most interesting genre for me. Yeah, always interested in new technology, interested in space, interested in aliens, interested in how people will change, how we will change as technology changes our lives, but how we'll also, in fact, probably stay the same. So that's yeah.
And you have a background in biology, is that correct, or is that just?
I don't in particular. I have a kind of sciencey. I'm kind of half sciencey, half artsy sort of person. But I studied biology a bit at school, but not after that. But it's just always been my interest. I'm very interested in animals, evolution, paleontology, all those kinds of areas. Genetics, very interesting. Yeah.
Would you say biology is, or I guess I'm hung up on this because of Carthage, but if there was a theme technologically in your work, has anything maybe carried over from your previous work to Aeon 14 that you've kind of brought, or was that something you were exploring, new within Aeon 14?
Well, when I became involved in the project, I was already working on a colonization series myself. So it segued quite nicely into Michael's ideas for how I could write in his universe. So there is a connection there. But my colonization is very, very low-tech. So there's quite a nice contrast.
Cool. I don't want to monopolize all the questions, so somebody else wants to jump in.
I'm curious. I mean, I mentioned this beforehand, but I'm curious what brings you to Taiwan? You just don't find a lot of. I mean, maybe a lot of people do go to Taiwan. I just don't know this, but I don't know anyone else who's actually ever moved to Taiwan before.
And you've just traveled a lot, right? This has been not the first destination.
Yeah, that's right. So, I've always just had a bit of wanderlust, which I suppose also figures in my interest in science fiction. So when I graduated, I went to live in Australia. I lived in Australia for about 7 years. And then I became a volunteer for the Australian government and went and lived in Laos in Southeast Asia for about 18 months, just teaching English, and then went back to the UK. And then about 7 years ago, we moved out to Taiwan. And it's really not really interesting reason. It's just that both my husband and I wanted our son to grow up, spend some of his childhood living in another culture, to kind of broaden his outlook on life and help him to understand that there's different ways of looking at things that are not better or worse than our own culture, but just different. So we thought what would be, because he was just quite young at the time, we thought he would pick up another language. So we thought, what would be a useful language for an English-speaking kid to learn? And the answer was Chinese, because it's really, really hard to learn as an adult, as I've found. So we looked into moving to China, but China's still quite rough around the edges. And then we looked into moving to Hong Kong, but Hong Kong is Cantonese speaking, whereas Taiwan is Mandarin speaking. Yeah. So that was how we ended up in Taiwan. But I'm very pleased that we did. We've been here 7 years now.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely love it. Yeah.
So how fluent is he? Is he
fluent? Yeah. He's fluent and he's literate, and he's picked up a lot of the culture as well. He doesn't realise it yet, but he's a little bit Taiwanese. Yeah.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah. It's been really good.
I've been listening to a lot of Chinese hip hop lately, which might not be related to Taiwan, but it just fascinates me how the culture has sort of like, I don't know, mixed up that way. Is he? So he goes to a Taiwanese school, and is he fully, or is it kind of a school for expats, or how does that work?
No, he went to a Taiwanese local school when he was 8.
Wow.
And so that was a bit of a baptism of fire for him. But after a year, he acclimatized and started picking up the language. And now he's at an international school, but it's a Taiwanese international school, so they still use a lot of Chinese. Yeah.
So he's 15 now then, eh?
Yeah, he's nearly 15 now.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's been a great experience. And it really feeds into the science fiction writing, because I think a lot of it is to like colonization, going to live somewhere new, adapting to new environments, adapting to unforeseen challenges. Sorry?
You can really write what you know.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. Obviously, it's not the same as going to live on another planet. But, yeah.
Is there a large group of expats in the area, or have you really had to integrate?
There's a lot more now than there was when we first came. Yeah, but I'll tell you about Laos. Living in Laos is a little bit more interesting, because I lived in Laos in the beginning of the 1990s, and at that time, I don't think they wouldn't allow any American expats. They wouldn't allow any Americans into the country, even as tourists, because of what happened during the Vietnam War. And so the number of expats there were just tiny. And I had a friend who was married to a Thai guy. She was from New Zealand. She's married to a Thai guy. We were living in the capital, and my friend's friend came to see her, but she didn't know her address because there weren't any addresses. There were no names. The only street names were the really, really big main streets. Nowhere else had a name even. It was really, really undeveloped. You just lived in an area. So she had no address. So her friend got off the plane at the airport and she went to a taxi driver and she said, I'm looking for a New Zealand woman married to a Thai man and she's got 2 boys. And the taxi driver in the city of 1 million people, he goes, oh yeah, I think I know who you mean.
Oh.
He goes,
wow.
Yeah, she lives out near Tat Luang. So he drives her to Tat Luang. And they found a tuk-tuk driver. And this is like, again, it's like maybe 20, 30,000 people living in this area. And they said, we're looking for, the same story, New Zealand woman married to a Thai guy. They've got 2 boys. And he goes, oh, yeah, I know where she lives. And he took her there.
That is amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So everybody knew the foreigners because there was like just
So
maybe
few,
100 of us. Yeah.
Just for folks who don't know, expat is a term that it means expatriate. So if you were like moved to another country to find a bunch of Americans, for example, be part of the American expat community.
Yeah. So I guess that's a U.S. term. I don't know. Is it?
I think other people do use it, but it is. I've heard it primarily used to apply to Americans. I used to work for a Russian company, and there are a bunch of American expats who worked out in Moscow as well. So that's where I learned it. And Laos is the country directly west of Vietnam. So if you ever watched the movie Air America, where they're skirting the war basically to do things in North Vietnam. That's all took place in Laos, which is why they weren't particularly happy with the U.S. after that.
So Jenny, were you writing science fiction prior to moving to Taiwan, or did your author career begin as you moved to Taiwan?
It did I started a little bit before. I've always written on and off, but only seriously when I moved to Taiwan, because I was working full-time when we were in the UK. I used to teach English, and then I was an education manager. And then we moved to Taiwan and the whole lifestyle changed. And so I found more freedom to write, more time to write. Yeah. I think a lot of people do. A lot of people, when they become expats, they pursue their creative interests. We have a lot of artists and performance people here. So,
what kind of lifestyle change made that possible?
I stopped working full time. I'm not sure. Everything is really, really convenient in Taiwan. It's very cheap to eat out, so you're doing a lot less cooking. Everything is cheaper. I suppose that's the basic thing. Most things are cheaper, so you're not having to work so hard or for so long to have the same standard of living. So you just have more time. Yeah.
Very cool.
Do you have any plans? Are you setting your sights on another location once your son's out of school, or because I have a 16-year-old and I'm becoming very aware that he's about to leave, which kind of freaks me out. But I don't know. Is your son looking at colleges anywhere, or because that's fast around the corner?
Yeah, so we're heading back to the UK next year. We'll be going back to Britain. Yeah. We'll be going back to Britain so he can finish off his education in Britain. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is there a challenge with him getting into schools as far as does he have to go, I don't know, in the States we've got transcript that he'd have to go through and make sure his credits are all straight and things like that. Are there any challenges there? That's kind of the reason that we're going back, because to qualify as a home student in the UK, you have to live there for 3 years before you go to university. So if we went back when he was 18, 19, he wouldn't be able to get a student loan. Oh.
We would have to pay the overseas student fees for 3 years. Yeah. So
That makes sense.
So we have to go back when he's 16, and then he can go to university probably when he's 19. If that's what he wants to do, I'm not going to push him. But yeah, that's the thing.
Is writing making that possible since you can kind of work from anywhere, or are you going to have to transition back to like a full-time job in the UK?
Yeah, that's making. Well, both my husband and I now both work entirely from home.
Mm-hmm.
So we can work anywhere in the world. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
It makes it really good. Yeah.
Because you do nonfiction writing as your day job, right, Jenny?
Yeah. Although I'm actually now I'm probably nearly full. I could probably give it up now. But I was freelance writing for a long time. If anyone's interested, what I was doing, go to the Colgate website and input Jenny Green into the search, and you'll probably pull up a ton of articles. I've been writing for Colgate, writing for just a lot of gardening articles.
You mean Colgate? You mean the company that makes toothpaste?
Yeah, sorry?
Okay. The company that makes toothpaste?
Yeah, that's right. They have this massive website. I've been helping write the articles for it for about 5 years.
Are they the ones
anything about dentistry, just ask me.
Are they the ones with the potash mines in the Middle East? And that was Colgate as well?
Sorry?
The potash. Were we talking about potash mines at one point?
No, that wasn't me. No.
Okay. I was speaking with someone, because I thought it was you, who was a freelance writer writing nonfiction who was writing about potash mines in the Middle East. And we bonded over that because in Saskatchewan, where I grew up in Canada, there's lots of potash mines as well. It's flat, bald prairie, and there's this big mountain of dirt. It's because underneath there's this huge potash mine underneath the prairie. But apparently we can't bond over that.
It could easily have been me, because you just end up writing about anything, really. They write and say, can you do an article on this? And you go, oh, yeah, sure. And then you go to write and go, oh, my God, I don't know anything about this at all.
I'll be honest, like with, studying Its Wars Origins, I did think about dentistry in space. I was like, how terrible would it be to be isolated on a ship, between, I don't know, somewhere around Europa with no, like an impacted tooth, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like what?
You got the Autodoc.
I know, but you can't update the software on the Autodoc because you didn't pay your subscription fee, and so now you've got some pirated, Autodoc firmware software that you're afraid is going to pull the wrong tooth.
This is why James writes the more dystopian version of Aeon 14. He thinks of all these things that could go wrong. I'm just like, they solved all that stuff. Don't worry.
I love thinking about that stuff.
Yeah. Or like
I think dentistry problems are going to be, I don't think they're just going to pull them out, put a little seed in, and you'll just grow another tooth.
Just grow a new tooth, yeah.
There have been humans who get over 110 years grow a third set of teeth in some cases now, we found. Wow. So it's entirely possible that if you could just trigger that third set of teeth to grow sooner,
yeah,
you would just do exactly what you're saying, Jenny. You get the shot or whatever, or in Tannis' time, just trigger the nano. Well, in Tannis' time, you'd be like, you'd walk into a machine and like 5 minutes later, you'd walk out with new teeth,
Yeah.
So how can we hack it so the tooth grows upwards into your brain?
Yeah, see, this is why James.
Dystopian right there.
Yeah. Should we segue into the writing process and how Aeon 14 books are done? Unless there's anyone else want to ask Jenny?
I think I was going with, do you have your sights set on anywhere after the UK? Like once your son is set up with school and everything, are you looking at another part of the world, or are you thinking you'll stay in the UK for a while?
I'll probably stay there a little while because you know what it's like when you live somewhere, you never go to see the good places. So now I'm not in the UK. I'm thinking, I really want to go to Scotland. I really want to go to Wales. I really want to go to Ireland. So I'll probably do that for a little bit. But then I think I'll end up back in Asia. I just love Asia so much. I can feel my blood pressure lower as the plane flies over the border into Asia. It's easier here.
That's really cool to keep that in mind. I like low blood pressure.
Mm-hmm. Did I miss the questions that were on the template? Because I know I came in late. But I wanted to know, Jenny, in Carthage, Athens is the site for a lot of extreme like activities for recreation. If you could do any of the things on Athens, what would you do?
Well, I actually wrote a scene in Athens that is based on somewhere in Taiwan. So I would go do that thing because that was like one of my favorite things to do. And that's why I put it in the book. And that's why Isa Chen likes it so much, because I'm just totally living it through her. It's vicarious enjoyment. And it's the spot where she goes to the hot springs. And there's two waterfalls that enter this big terrace of hot springs, and one of them is volcanic water, so it's like really, really hot, and the other is cold spring water, and you can adjust the positions of the rocks to get the exact temperature that you want in your little pool.
And I've
been there. There is a place near Taipei where you can do that. And I took some friends there, and we just sat in this hot spring for about 4 hours till we were just pure prune. We were just totally wrinkled. Yeah, it's an amazing place. I'm not sure if it's still there because there was we get a lot of earthquakes, and I did hear that it had got a bit messed up at a recent earthquake. So I'll have to see if it's still there. But
that could happen on Athens too.
Yeah.
Athens is reforming itself on a daily basis.
Yeah, cool place.
It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, next up is Tyr, which is also a rather extreme planet too.
All those young planets, they've got a lot going on.
Well, Tyr and Troy are older.
You know, we need to agree on the pronunciation of these things, because I'm calling it Tyre.
Yeah, that's, you know, when I named it that, I'm like, the British people are all going to think.
Aeon 14.
I was thinking about that. Like, the Brits are all going to think that I've named a planet after a tire, after a car tire, but it's named Tyr because of Tyr and Sidon, which are two ancient cities who are currently, I believe, they would have been in Tyr would be modern day Lebanon. And that I believe that it was pronounced Tyr historically. Hopefully, if I'm wrong, someone else will.
Oh, you're probably right.
Yeah, my favorite story about Tyr and Sidon is that when Alexander the Great showed up, and I don't know if this is a true story or not, it's just one that I think gets repeated a lot. He walked, and no one had ever breached the walls of the city of Tyr. And Alexander the Great shows up, and he says, "Surrender." And the guys are like, "We're not going to surrender. You're joking." So Alexander the Great, it's right in these cliffs. He just starts marching his a bunch of men off the edge of the cliff. Toward the edge of the cliff, and his troops are marching toward the edge of the cliff, and then they just start marching off the end of the cliff. And after about 10 men marched off the edge of the cliff, he called them to halt, and he went back and said, "Surrender," and they did, because he showed that his men were going to do anything for him, and there was no way they could hold up. So that's like,
wow.
I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if that's true or not. If that's just one of the the standards. My computer suddenly announced it's going to reboot, so let me just quickly fix this. There we go. I was using a computer to record that has not been updated for a while. Windows is like, I'm about to reboot this computer on you. So,
and you think the auto dock would not mess up your teeth? I mean, come on now.
That's true. You just have to look at the Windows 10 update process to know how much we should trust the auto dock. It's a good point.
Yeah, we're so screwed.
So one of the fan questions that I thought was kind of interesting, and I'm glad that Jen is here as well now. This is not confusing at all, having a Jen and a Jenny. There's like way too many J's. Jen, Jenny, James.
You're surrounded.
I know. You guys are ganging up or something. Me and Lisa are just like hanging out in the middle of the alphabet, trying to be safe.
I know.
We're also married to a Jill, so that's
the other thing too. Yeah, I am surrounded.
Sample is a little skewed.
Yeah. But it was about how much influence the other Aeon 14 authors have in the books. And how much I have in theirs, how much they have in mine. He actually said the team, which I think is appropriate. So I thought I would chat about that a little bit, and maybe you guys could kind of chime in with what your experiences are. But by and large, like the main plot line that follows Tanis is one that I have pretty complete control over. Most of the authors have no clue what I'm even doing with it. I told Lisa because Lisa's one of those people who doesn't mind spoilers, so she knows largely how the end all plays out. And Jill knows too, because I've been telling Jill for years, my wife. So that one is very much sacrosanct. It's mine. I determine how everything's going. Everything that happens in the Orion War series is very much in line with what I want to have happen. And even in the other series, because there's so much referencing between things. Tannis is oftentimes referencing the Phobos Accords, what happened to Sentience Wars and whatnot. A lot of the past is largely written in stone, or at least certain points of it are written in stone. So when James started writing the Sentience Wars, I had a document that outlined the main events that happened in the Sentience Wars, only about 2 pages long, and then there's just all sort of the ad hoc references in the books. And we established sort of what the technology level was at the beginning of the Sentience Wars, and the things that could work and could not work, and established how fast starships could fly at that point, and so on and so forth. And then it was just sort of like, hey, James, we've got
go crazy with it,
and here's point B, so just go. Fill in the big blank in the middle. That's largely what I think Lisa's gotten to do. And Jenny's been a little bit more, I wouldn't say it's been prescriptive, but you have a smaller, more finite area to work in. But even then, I never really described too much of the planet and what's going on the planet. So you largely have free reign there as well, especially on any planet other than Carthage. Those ones are going to be almost entirely open to do whatever you want. Is that kind of how you guys feel, or do you feel like I'm like the overbearing,
Oh, God. That's pretty darn accurate, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, here's your framework, now run.
Yeah.
Go crazy with it.
Yeah, and that's been really interesting and refreshing. I mean, there hasn't been a time that you were just like, no, it wouldn't explain like why. Like it's more like, well, hey, that ties into this, ties into this, ties into this, and so it's a conversation about how something is going to affect the overall world. I'm trying to think, like there have been some tech things that were like, no, that won't work, and that's fine. I enjoy that kind of conversation a lot. But I think that it's kind of funny because like when we first started this, I think I didn't think through like how it. Well, I thought about it a lot, but I hadn't thought through a lot of like the writing nuts and bolts pieces where it really could have gone bad and would have been like actually really bad. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. And I really, Michael allows a lot of ideas into the world, which I think is really cool for me because I get to satisfy the creative things that I am interested in and want to add to the world. And it's not like that's stifled. Like it just means that there are guidelines on either side to make it fit, and then I don't know. So for me, that I've enjoyed it quite a bit. I don't feel like I'm not exploring ideas that I didn't want to already explore. This is just a story that I'm getting to do it in. So I don't know. I've enjoyed that a lot. Like I don't know how does everybody else feel about that?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, it's really nice to. There's a whole lot of freedom there. Really, I mean, it's just like, okay, here are your characters, here's your timeline, here's the tech, and whatever you can come up with. And it's very, very collaborative. So we'll toss ideas back and forth. And the three of us, especially since we're dealing from the Sentience Wars all the way up to Outsystem, in fact, James has created a really great Excel doc that has kind of all of the story beats from the Sentience Wars all the way out. So we know kind of, because there's so much going on at this point that, we want to, it's kind of to the point where we have to have that document to keep track of everything. So it's really helpful. I kind of digress there.
Now, I'll say one thing too that I've also thought about this again, is that I feel like kind of philosophically we're on the same sheet of music. Like I'm not trying to write something that isn't what I would have wanted to write anyway. I don't know how to really get that across, but I'm not fighting against like, well, you need to get this idea in here, or that I don't want that in my series, or like that's not something that's hard because it's already kind of there,
Yeah, I feel like the universe is there, the framework is there. What I like about it is that it's really believable to me anyway. As I'm reading it, it all makes sense. And then the characters and what happens is kind of up to us, really. And what I don't know about you guys, but what I do is I say to Michael, I need for this thing to be able to happen in my story. How does the tech work? How can we do that with the tech? And he'll come back and say, well, that can't happen, but it could happen this way. Or he'll say, I'll figure that out. Don't worry about it.
That happens too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I one of the things I want, and I think I've got this more from I've managed a lot of software development teams, and sometimes as many as like 20 or 30 people spread across the globe. The biggest team I had one time had people all the way from the Ukraine to Portland, Oregon, all working on one team. And I learned, and writing software is people think, oh, it's just a bunch of code monkeys, down in the basement, just banging on stuff. But software development is like writing a novel, except it's a novel that has to work on computers and work for humans as well. And you'll write it in multiple languages simultaneously. And then the reader will get to tell you what they think of it and you'll have to change it. So it's actually significantly harder than writing a novel in that respect. But it's a very creative endeavor. It's more like you have a problem and you need a solution, because that's what all software is for. It's to solve a problem. And you have to write the part in the middle. And in working with these teams, I've learned that people will come up with better ideas than I have, or they'll come up with better solutions than I thought of. So what I always like to do is I like to encourage people to come up with their ideas, and then we'll see how we can make it work. And in many respects, when I was writing a software team, I would have people working on this part of the project and people working on this part of the project, people working on this part of the project. And I had to make sure that everything aligned and all the pieces fit together. And it's a lot less forgiving, obviously, than writing a novel, because if it doesn't work, it just simply doesn't work, or it does horrible things like pulls out the wrong tooth. I never wrote medical software. There's a reason I didn't want to write anything to do with medical stuff. That's just a nightmare. And banking, medical and banking. No software developer wants to get involved in that. But although James writes financial software, so I'm Jim Dean, whose name is also James.
Right.
Just be the J's; they're everywhere. So anyway,
the attack of the Jays.
I feel like I didn't ever make the connection fully until just now, but I feel like that sort of collaborative atmosphere that I'm used to working in helped with this. Where you don't want to, it demoralizes your team if you shoot down all their ideas. You just say nope, 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 no. You have to say either yes, that's fantastic, let's go with that and see what happens, or B, can we tweak it like this to make it fit with everything else? And it sounds like from you guys are saying that has worked pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, one thing from the beginning when I thought about going into this is that I always wanted to write the best Aeon 14 novel that I could. And I've always really appreciated Michael's, what your readers want, or at least you have a pretty good idea of it, even when it's like yeah, we're going to do this. They might not like it, but this is what we're going to do. And then eventually they come around. But that I really wanted to learn from that. Like, I also feel like there's been a lot of learning for me, and I've learned a ton from Michael and everyone else who's part of the, Lisa's technical knowledge is I learn as I read, I'm enjoying the story and I learn. But that was something that I didn't want to write, a James Aaron novel within Aeon 14. I wanted to write a book that, if you took my name off it, it would still convincingly be an MD Cooper book. And so that was kind of a philosophy I had from the beginning, where I wasn't going to be precious about my, that word's not, you can't change my beautiful language or whatever, it's like, no, let's do what's going to work for the readers. And it feels like we've been, successful in that. That was what I wanted to do. So,
yeah.
I come at this from a different kind of creative background, because I'm a director of film. And that's an incredibly collaborative environment too. So, I can compare this to that and go, wow, this is exactly the same way. And there's, synergy is such a hackneyed word, and I kind of hate to use it, but there's a real truth to it. Mm-hmm. And when we all get together, we really bounce off of each other well. All of us do. And it's just, it really is, you get more out of that kind of a collaboration than working in a silo all by yourself, I think.
Yeah. And silos aren't that much fun really either. Some people like it.
Yeah, what James is saying about that, not being precious about your writing, I think that can be a real danger in collaborations with writers. Writers are notorious for, because it's their baby, they don't want anybody touching, they want any criticism, a 4-star review, and they're weeping into the pillow. I know with my background of freelance writing, I've been used for years for people taking my work and entirely rewriting it, and sometimes I think they're making it worse even, but I've learned to not mind at all. And Michael's sort of coming to me and saying, shall we change this or can we change that? And I'm going, change whatever the hell you like.
I know. That's exactly how I feel. Yeah.
Well, you guys do fight back on some things. If there's certain times they'll say, I'd like to change this, and you're like, well, I'm trying to do this thing, and that's why I've done that. Although I think usually I'm pretty good at detecting when you guys are trying to drive the story in a certain direction. I don't usually screw it up. But it happens every now and then. I'll be like, why are we doing this? This seems silly. You're like, well, I'm setting up X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, okay. That makes sense.
And that's always a good note, though, because if you're thinking that means the reader is going to think that.
Right.
So I have not set, whatever happened, I haven't set that up properly to.
Yeah. And that's why I might leave a note there that, like, there needs to be some sort of foreshadowing earlier on that would indicate that things are going in this direction. Otherwise, it comes out of the blue. And that's what, from sort of we've almost segued a little bit into sort of, because some people ask about the writing craft, but there's this thing in writing called Chekhov's gun. And I'll probably get the exact specifics, but in scene 1, if Chekhov puts a gun on the mantle in a room, someone is going to get shot with that gun. That's why the gun is there, and if you're in scene 10 and someone just grabs a gun off the mantle and shoots someone, that doesn't work, because for a reader, the world is only what you've told them. In the real world, there are guns everywhere. We don't have to say, people's houses have guns in them. There's probably a gun somewhere. We don't have to say that in the real world because we all know it. But in a writing world, we assume that the things we're being told are relevant and the things we're not being told are irrelevant.
Right.
Because otherwise, writing would be boring. We would just be giving you lists of things that are everywhere all the time. So there is stuff like that, and that's something you have to keep in mind. And the cool thing, and this is something that's really neat that a lot of the other authors don't get out there. They might use beta writers and readers and whatnot, but they're not. I don't think it's exactly the same. But what we're getting someone who's really looking at the story with a critical eye, but fresh at the same time, reading it with a critical eye and saying, okay, I understand the rules of the world. I understand where the story has to go, and now I'm going to read it like a reader and see if things feel right when they come in. And a lot of writers don't get that, so in that respect, we're all kind of spoiled. In fact, sometimes I feel kind of bad because I don't get that. Actually, you guys all get that, but I don't. Mainly because I'm writing too many books to get them to everybody to read ahead of time. So that doesn't happen too much. Although I do send certain chapters to other authors because there's stuff like, for example, the stuff with Jason in War on a Thousand Fronts, I sent to Lisa first to make sure she agreed that I was doing Jason properly, because she has a lot of input now into how Jason works. And she had few changes that she wanted to make. I think it was just a couple of things she didn't say quite like that or something like that. But
well, that's where Jen exercises her power, because she's the she's the central checkpoint.
Yeah.
But I guess to back up, so at least for the Sentience Wars books, like basically we have, we start with, I kind of come up, we went back and forth with an idea. We talked about the bounds of the story. I wrote an outline, and one of the things I did for the very beginning, like Michael has put so much trust in me with this, where we ended up writing a 5-book series, which when you think about it, like bringing someone on you didn't necessarily know very well, a year and a half ago, and trusting them with this, like, to me, that was, I really wanted to prove that I could just pull it off, so I was writing, when I first wrote Lissa's Dream, I was uploading a chapter, I don't know how fast it was, I think every 3 days or so, to a Google Doc, just to show Michael that I would do the work, because I was worried about that what happened if in the middle of it, I was just like, I'm sorry, can't do it, and I think we already had the pre-order up at that point. And so it was just a huge amount of trust. And so anyway, so we, based on the outline that we've come up with and the conversations that we've had, and then a tool that we use is Slack, which gives us the ability to chat, all the time, to ask questions and verify things and whatnot. Like, I wrote the first draft, then that would go to Michael. Michael reads it, and one of the things that I said, which everyone else might have a little bit different, but I was like, if there's something that should be changed, write over it. Just, we use track changes, but again, it was more important to me that the book fit with the tone and the language. And if there's a word that Michael would use, one of his crazy, Canadianisms, then that, I wanted that to be in there. I didn't, because to me also, one of the things I was always really worried about was, and I personally, as a reader, I would see a co-authored book and be like, I don't want to do that, and so it was really like, what can I do to make this as much, it's a Tom Clancy book, right? And maybe, Tom Clancy didn't actually write it, but it's enough like the Tom Clancy book that I'm gonna buy into it. And so that is something I really wanted, that all those things needed to be right. And so basically Michael would, take the first draft, go through it, read, make his notes with track. And we use track changes, which I think has been a really useful tool, because that's a place where you can see the change and go ahead and just accept the change, make an adjustment. But that allows us to really quickly go through a document and make those adjustments. So Michael would read it, give his feedback. I go through and I've got, a week or so to make my changes and fixes. And there have been times like, yeah, you forgot a chapter here, or you need to add a whole another, I think you're missing a build up to this whole thing, or you kind of forgot that somebody was on series when they actually should be on, in the show. And that's going to take 6 weeks. So think about that. So we fix those things. Then typically it would go back. Michael reviews it again. Then for Sentience Wars Origins, we were working with T. Iyer, who writes as TG Iyer. And she was the editor that would then go through and have her developmental. I mean, she does a combination of developmental and line edits, which kind of grew less as time went on, I guess. But Lissa's Dream, she gave us a lot of developmental feedback about what her thoughts were about the story and the characters and continuity in the characters and things like that. And then it comes back to me, goes back to Michael, and then T would do a final line edit after that. And then I think she might even have done a third line edit by the time, because typically we would get it up, and then as we get the feedback, then after all that, it would go to the just-in-time readers, who are a list of, folks from the Facebook group that have volunteered to read and are familiar with the stories, that give their feedback. And so they're doing also the same kind of thing. Like if there's something that jumps out at them, like a word that isn't correct, or, line type edits, or, in Jim's case, like HVAC on a ship wouldn't work like this. You need to adjust this. It's kind of like a hospital, and I've done this before. And we need to fix all that. So we end up rewriting 4 chapters, which, but that's at least for my stuff, that's been the process, where I think sometimes it's really easy to criticize, saying, well, how did you do this in such a short time? Well, there's a very specific way that the book is approached, and a process, right, so that it's not just handed off and a person sits with it and thinks about it and, whatever. No, it's very specific. There's a time, it's a project, it's managed like a project. Mm-hmm. And everybody has a gate that's going to pass through, where the product, the book, has become better with each gate. And so it can be frustrating, because when you're looking at 100,000 words, mistakes still get through. It's just how it is. But right, but at least for my stuff, that's been the process. Has that been the same for everyone else? Maybe I just need more help. I don't know.
Well, we've talked about being a pantser versus an outliner. Jenny, mm-hmm, what are you?
I write an outline and then I deviate from it. So I don't know what the hell my process is, really.
Is that the Wesley Dean Smith writing into the dark method, where you just outline and then you lose it? I forget. I know there's an official method. There's an official name for that.
I kind of write about. I try to write a really, really detailed outline, and I have an idea where the book's going. But then as I start writing it, the characters sometimes take it in different directions, or things that I thought would make sense don't make sense when I actually mm-hmm. get there, and I have to change it. But my process with Michael is a little bit more straightforward. He basically puts in all the technical stuff that I think, well, this has got to happen, but I don't really know how. So then Michael adds all of that stuff in. And when Carthage came back, I was really impressed, in fact, how it heightened the detail of all of that stuff was heightened, just because I don't know that kind of detail. But for example, there's a scene where there's almost, oh no, is this a spoiler? Or maybe I shouldn't say. But there's a scene that involves the air traffic control. And Michael knew exactly how that would play out, and I only had a vague idea. So Michael kind of adds in all of it. If I didn't know he'd done that, I would never have been able to tell, I don't think, as a reader. what impressed me was how smoothly it's still all read. And like parts where Tanis comes in and things like that, I can't really write Tanis in the way that Michael would write Tanis, so he will put those parts in. So it's still collaborative. I don't think it's quite as back and forth as the same process as James. I'm more kind of, I just need to like write it and get it done, and then Michael has added his bits. But I don't know. Maybe you can say, Michael, about differences. I don't know.
By the way, I got to credit where credit's due. Lisa did some of that stuff with the air traffic control.
Oh, thanks, Lisa.
Because I knew that I didn't think it didn't quite pass the sniff test with me, as far as like how I thought they would talk. And then Lisa and I hashed it out. And of course, what Lisa and I had to figure out was like, well, Carthage is actually only has maybe a couple 100,000 people living on it. So
yeah, I kind of went a little.
Yeah. At first,
yeah.
Jenny.
I had
Lisa
a vision
wrote,
of it being a bigger
first Lisa
planet.
wrote, like, what if Atlanta Central Air or whatever, Atlanta's airport, or like, what would JFK say if they were on the horn with you? I'm like, well, this is, it's a little smaller, But yeah, I think it was really cool. It was actually a collaborative process, and then Jenny got to go over it. Because one thing I do want is, at the end of the day, I want the authors to really believe in their story. I want you guys to like love the story, because I want you to promote it like you love it. And that sounds sort of crass, but I mean, if you don't believe in the story and love the story, the fans will notice that. They'll be able to tell that, well, if the author doesn't really like this story, why would I like the story? So that's one of the most important things to me, that you guys love the story. Of course, because I want you to write more. Because if the fans like it, they want more stories. And there's a lot more to write still. There's a lot more story to tell. So that's one of the most important things. So the author actually always gets to run over it at the end. Technically I have the final say, but I want them to have the last look through on the book. And to be able to come back and say, you know what, if you change this, I didn't like it. James's later books, by the way, did not have as much back and forth as the first one did. And James has a harder thing to write than everybody else, because James is writing harder science fiction over a wider area. One of the things that I think every co-author has struggled with, except for Jenny, who hasn't had to deal with it really yet, is the time differences. A little bit, because it did take 3 days to get back and forth to Athens and whatnot. But that's something people don't really think about, is like writing with these time jumps is hard.
Yeah.
And then trying to line them all up. And it's especially hard for James, because James has been writing these multiple threads where across the soul system. And it's like, okay, well, I've got these people here at this time. I got these people here at this time. I need to get them together. It's like, well, it's 2 weeks from here and 4 weeks from there. And so how do we do that? And what are they going to do for these 4 weeks? You have to think that the character relationships will progress, but no one wants to read about 4 weeks of playing Stark on a spaceship, or something like that. So you're going to find the ways to highlight those different things. I think that's mostly where most stuff happened from. There are parts, I think, of everybody's book where I do a bunch of the writing. Like a lot of the stuff with Brit, especially in Alyssa's run, I wrote a lot of the Brit stuff when she's on Eros and whatnot, because I want to sort of highlight different locales within the soul system, and I kind of like Brit.
Well, that really changed the direction of the series, because she was not going to have as big a role as she did, and then basically it became clear that she had to come back, and that had a huge impact.
Yeah, it did make her more central to whatever was going on, and it was a great tie-in too, because it brought a lot of cool things together. In Jenny's book, the funny thing is, the thing that Jenny was worried about the most was the stuff that happened to Nathan Hart. She was worried that she completely jumped the shark and done everything wrong with him, as regarding to a metamorphosis he went through. And I think I changed like barely a word in there. It was perfect.
Really?
It was. Yeah, I really liked it. I mean, I think I fixed like a typo or two or something like that. But otherwise, I left it exactly how it was. And it was, ironically, the one thing that I did to make a little more changes to was the exact position of the Space and Air Traffic Control Tower, because I had to make sure it lined up with the descriptions in Orion Warning. That was the biggest change I had to make. I also had to do a lot of thinking about exactly how a moon would skew out of its orbit, just to make sure that the fans didn't come after us for that one. But that was a cool thing about it, because I would never have thought to have a scenario where you accidentally move a moon out of orbit. Like James thinks of things like having the autodock pull the wrong tooth. For some reason, I don't think about things like that. I think about things the way they should work. I think this is the software. like it's got to work like this because it's how it's supposed to work. They wouldn't do it if it wouldn't work the way it's supposed to. But of course, reality does not always work that way, as every single version of every single piece of software we've ever used can attest to, our experiences can attest to. But yeah, so I would never have thought to do that, but Jenny did. And then we worked together to make it so that it fit properly with the universe and the tool sets the characters would have and everything like that. I think it came through really well. I think it was a pretty cool way to open the story. And I think trying to think of stuff that I've had to rewrite for you, Lisa, or that you had me do the writing for.
You did the writing for. Actually, you're kind of responsible for the development of the twins, Landon and Logan, because you wrote that scene down in the ring where Landon, Logan, and Terrence and Eric attacked and demolished the Northern Cartel ring down in there. Remember that? You're the one responsible for putting the twins in centaur bodies.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. And I liked that so much that that really influenced how Landon and Logan's story evolved. They weren't originally going to be POV characters in Proxima, but they end up playing they have a significant storyline in there now.
Yeah.
And so that was because of you.
That actually was a little bit from a fan too. I'm probably going to butcher his name. I don't know if it's his real name or not. It's such a strange name. I can't know. It's Belxander Dmitry Saratov or something. It's the worst butchering you've ever heard of someone's name. But his first name is Belxander, and he got so excited about the mechs in the Rika story. I think he sent me 5 or 6 emails outlining different types of mechs and what they could do and stuff like that. And one of his ideas was actually the Centaur style mech, which
I didn't know that.
Yeah, which made it. And I put my own stamp on it. I had my own ideas about how it would work and whatnot. That's how that ended up in there. And then actually also the body that Mallory gets in A Woman Who Lost Everything was a little bit based on the idea of like a centaur mech as well.
So that's very cool. Is he also responsible for the LHO?
No, that was all me.
Okay.
No, although I did make an interesting mistake in the prior Rika book. And he actually, it's not the version most people have read, but another reader, Timothy Van Osterhoek, pointed out that Phineas specifically said that Rika couldn't have a 5-fingered hand because it was too hard for her brain to relearn how to control 5 fingers, and that's why they gave her the 3-fingered hand. And then there was why none of them had 4 arms, was because it was too hard to learn to control more arms. And I did actually highlight that with Mallory in
you did
everything, how she actually had to use just 4 of her limbs and sort of use them in pairs. But then I introduced these 4-armed mechs and didn't really mention the fact that Phineas said no, and then suddenly Phineas made them. So I made this note in the afterword too, while Phineas took up his own words as a challenge and figured out how to make 4-armed mechs in the process. That sort of actually did seem to fit with something Phineas would do, be like, maybe I can figure out a way to pull this off. And then he
challenge accepted.
Exactly, it's his own challenge.
I wanted to say that I really appreciate the collaborative effort is not just something that the authors experience. I also get to be a part of that, which is really cool. Because developmentally, Michael and I will talk about something and just joking around about something, and then it actually turns into, oh, well, wait, this could actually be part of the story. And then when I'm editing, I'm like, that's a conversation we had.
Very cool.
So it's really cool.
Very cool.
I'm not a writer. I don't get to have my words in the books, but I still get my influence in there, which is really cool. So there's still my stamp on the world, which I like a lot.
Awesome.
So I still feel like I get to be involved. And that's been most the case with Rika, especially. And the Delta team too. Been very.
I would love to, I think in another episode we need to talk about editing, because I only came to editing as a writer, but you write something, you need to edit it, and it's really fascinating to me that to be an editor who's not necessarily a writer, I guess because my first thought, even when you say that, is like, oh, you'll be a writer eventually. It's going to happen, but maybe not. That's like, I shouldn't think that, right? But it's a totally different skill, and it's a different expertise, and it would be we should explore that, in another episode, I think.
Well, yeah, we can definitely do that. I have a lot to say on that.
Cool.
I wasn't
Jen has a lot to say. This is amazing.
Hey.
I wonder if did we really answer the one fan's question about how to write? Did we really address that? I mean, we talked about how.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about that yet.
That might be something that. Did I just derail us by jumping onto that?
Well, no, we did need to train.
The behind the scenes process either. We talked about the process for James, but we didn't talk about the order of operations that happens with the other series. So series.
Is anybody doing things different than how?
Maybe a little.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Video is just not going to happen for me, so I'll just be a box for the rest, I guess. So the process is largely the same for most of the authors. There's varying amounts of back and forth, and some of it depends on the plot too. Some people are writing a more linear plot, and some people are writing a plot that jumps around a lot more, and those sometimes require more touch points and work. But there's like I said, the initial outline is how I talked about, where we sort of establish all the ground rules, where point A is, where point B is, where the story has to fill in the middle. And then the other author, other than me, obviously, writes the first draft. And there might be parts in there where they flag, fix this, fill this in. Like Jill, who writes this, Chris J. Pike, my wife, she just puts in, someday we'll get her on. It'll happen. But sometimes with the space battle, she just writes space battle here. Here's the outcome I need. And I'll write the space battle. Because she doesn't have this. She's the sort of person that can walk out of a store in a mall and not remember which direction she has to go, because she just doesn't think spatially the same way that I do. Yeah. And there's a lot of differences in people about the way they think about things spatially. Like in my mind, I know my distance from everything at all times. I can walk through a completely black room without a problem. My wife doesn't, because she doesn't think about those sorts of things all the time. And pilots, for example, one of the skills pilots have to have is they have to have a special
spatial awareness.
Yeah, and women, ironically, typically have that better than men do, usually. Is what I've heard, is why sometimes they make, also women can handle G-forces better, which makes them better pilots in some respects. But all of that aside, those might be the sorts of things where I do more work when I go through the novel. But what happens is the author writes it, and then I read through it. And depending on how I work with that author, I may or may not use track changes. I don't use them actually anymore in almost any circumstance. We're doing them right now in Proxima Centauri because of a lot of nuances we're trying to get right. But in this last pass, but sometimes I don't. I'll just make a comment saying everything from here to here, I went through and made a bunch of changes. Here's the gist of them. You might want to read through it to make sure everything looks good to you. Make sure the character voices are correct and whatnot. Or that I didn't screw anything up and ruin one of your plans you had in mind. And then it goes back to the co-writer. And sometimes we're doing this in tandem. Like they're following behind me as I'm going, or that sort of thing. And then it goes back to them. They go through it, make all of their changes, and note that they've addressed the things I raised and how they address them. And then I'll go through it again, make sure that all that is done not properly, but done in a way that makes sense to me. A lot of times you guys come up with solutions to problems I didn't expect. I'm like, this has to happen like this. And you're like, oh, I'll just do it like this instead. And I'm like, hey, that works. It's cool. And then I do one final run through the book, make sure all the dates line up, regions line up, that there's no outstanding issues that we need to deal with. Then it goes off to Jen or T, depending on who's editing that series. They, of course, go through the story. I do the initial run through of all of the edits that we get back on a book. And just to kind of give you guys an idea, an average book of about 300 pages comes back with between 1,500 and 5,000 changes from the editor. It's a lot. And a lot of it is comma placement or just working on clauses. Editors are really good at picking up duplicated words. If we're using the same word over and over, we won't notice it because we're not reading it sort of linearly. We're kind of, once you write it the first time, a lot of times you start to hop around a bit, or you know what you mean to say, so you think of what you meant to say, not what you actually did say. So editors pick up a lot of duplicated words. They'll pick up names that we've reused too many times. For example, that's That's one of my classic problems. Or they'll pick up names between different series because different authors may not know that they're reusing names. Like I think that happened recently to James. He had a character named Carson, and we've already got a lot of Carsons. In fact, there's 2 Carsons in the latest Rika book, even. So I mean, it's trying to reduce as much confusion as possible for folks. So that happens. And that edit will come back, and I'll go through the first pass. If there's anything more substantial, like the editor comes back and says, I don't feel like the relationship between these 2 people was working because this person never really responded the way I thought they would respond, and later on they're thinking this. They're acting like they really did want to be in a relationship, but they didn't give the reader any clues about that. So that I'll usually I might make a change and then just comment on it and let the co-author see that, or I might just hand it to them and say, what do you think we should do with this? So there's that round that happens, and then once we sort of get those things sussed out, it goes off to the JIT readers. The JIT readers will find any major typos or anything like that, and then that is the version that ends up for pre-orders. But as soon as the JIT readers are done, it gets kicked back to Jen or T for a final proof. And then they'll usually even catch, that the big thing that gets caught there is just more comma placement. And sometimes I've been known to make mistakes, correcting mistakes from JIT readers. So that will sometimes happen as well. And so that gets in there. There's one in the latest book. Actually, this one luckily didn't make it all the way out. For whatever reason, I had the number 162 instead of the letter F. I don't know how that happened. I meant to be correcting the British spelling of the word favorite in Jenny's book, but somehow instead replaced it word. Yeah, there was one favorite that you spelled with the U, so I had to take that out.
I try my best.
It's okay. I get them in there sometimes.
In the same language.
I thought I got them all.
Yeah, you did catch it, Jen. But somehow when I accepted the change, I must have mashed my face into the keyboard at the same time. Replaced the letter F with 162, and the JIT readers caught that, so it didn't go out. But there are things like that.
162 it.
So that happens, and then there's the final proof. And sometimes even a couple more repeated words, like Jen will say, you used the word pulse 9 times in these last 4 paragraphs. If you could remove 2 of them, I'd feel a lot better. I think it's an actual comment from her there.
I think the comment is more like, can we not use this word 9 times in the last 2 paragraphs? Is there any way we can change this?
Depends how late at night, how long your day has been. The comment.
Oh, yeah.
I am.
So there's, where was I going with all of this? So that's one of the things that's one of the last steps will happen. Of course, then I publish that final version that gets out. So I typically read the book 3 times before it goes out, and by reading, I'm making. I would probably say I make between 5 and 10,000 changes in the average book, and they could be as small as just swapping out words, changing names. I introduce some new, a difference to the attack or anything like that. Some of the books it's more. I mean, I guess it depends on what the definition of changes, because some of them, like you guys said, I write entire sections of the book. And I'd forgotten. I wrote a whole new section in Alpha Centauri 2, the part where they're going down the elevator and everything too, when they first land on the spire.
Yeah, that's that whole section, that whole fight. Yeah.
You had, I think part of it I just changed what you wrote, because you had them with the maglev cars at the node and everything like that.
Yeah.
So that's how you had it. But I wrote sort of the whole approach. I'm like, interesting. I wanted to see what the inside of the ring would look like before it was built. So I wanted to know. So I wrote more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I had him approaching from the land side, and you had him approaching from the back.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a great ad.
Yeah, it was fun. I like doing something. Yeah. So that's sort of an idea of what happens in the process, and it's largely the same for everybody. Maybe the amount of back and forth we have differs depending on if we had a big mistake or something like that. Not a mistake, just something that didn't jive. Because sometimes not all the authors read all the books. I think some folks are a little behind on them. Lisa's the only one. She's has the special. Although she's actually, you haven't read Proteus Bridge yet, so
I haven't read Proteus Bridge. I just started Carthage, but I didn't finish it because there's this book that I have to get out.
Yeah.
So.
And you get this full-time job thing going on. So. Lisa basically just lives in Aeon 14 and Hallmark videos.
Yeah.
I've listened to all the audio, and I've actually converted some of the text docs so I could listen to them on audio, but that's reading time is tough. But
that's another thing. I know that James and I, and thank you, James, for this. This was brilliant. There's an app called FB Reader that has a it's called a Speak Plus. There's a plugin, and the only thing that the mechanical voice that reads to you does not translate well is the the
link speak
greater than and link speak. So what I'll do is I will go through the Word document that I'm working on, and I will scrub all the link speak brackets out of it and then send it to FB Reader, and I will, on my way into work and on the way back out back home, which to me is a 30-45 minute drive, I'll listen to it. And sometimes just hearing it audibly, you'll catch things and you'll make a mental note, okay, I got to go back and change that. So that's kind of made at least my transit time to and from work a lot more valuable.
There you go. There was a question too about advice to new writers or people trying to write. Do you guys have any advice that you would like to share with folks that want to write? I think it was also like anything specific to science fiction too.
I've been attending a writers group for since I've been in Taiwan, really. So I've met a lot of people who want to write, and my main piece of advice to writers who want to write is to just write, because we get totally overwhelmed by our day-to-day lives, but also I think it comes from a lack of self-confidence. People are really worried that they'll find that they always wanted to be a writer, but they're worried that if they write something, it'll be terrible, and they will realize they can never be a writer, and their dreams will be. So there's kind of a self-sabotaging about it. So I always say to people, just write. There's a great piece of advice about writer's block from an editor, and I can't remember her name now, but she says, if you hit writer's block, lower your standards and carry on writing.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
There's one that I read, and it's also by someone far more famous than I am, but they said, when you're writing a rough draft, what you have to remind yourself is you're shoveling sand into a sandbox so that you can make sandcastles later.
Right.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And so sometimes when you're writing a rough draft, you just feel like I don't know what I'm doing here. This is garbage. But if you write nothing, well, that's far worse. Like the other thing is you can't edit a blank page. You know? So it all comes down to just writing. You're right, Jenny.
Yeah, coming from a creative community like I am from my day job, you guys know I work for Hallmark and I do their film and video. And for decades, we were the largest creative community on the planet. So, I work with a lot of creative people, and we have what's called the creative process. And the general consensus is creativity is a muscle just like any other muscle, and you have to exercise it to get better at it. So, and we have a screensaver that, and I will edit it for NSFW purposes, but it starts out with, hey, I have an idea. This is pretty cool. Hey, this is awesome. This is crap. Oh my God, I'm no good. Oh my God, I suck at this. Hey, this isn't so bad. This is pretty good. Oh no, this is crap. I mean, you just go through this whole cycle, but you end up back to, hey, I have a thing and I've done it. And you just have to keep on keeping on. And it's the sandbox principle, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say, I think that's great advice. Just write. You have to write and just tell a story. Like tell a story with great characters, and if the tripod story structure, a character in a situation with a problem, try fail, move forward into a new world, either changed or unchanged, and how does that affect the character? But people remember characters. They actually don't remember stories that much, but it took me forever to learn that. And I have a journalism degree. I'd been a reporter actually before I went on active duty in the Army. So I was always writing for editors, like always writing to please a gatekeeper. And I didn't write for a long time. And I was lucky to join a local group here in town that has a lot of like writers that have earned awards. Kate Wilhelm, who helped start Clarion, was kind of a mentor of the group. And so for a long time, I was just writing to try and please people in the group, and then trying to please editors, and then banging my head against magazines and contests and writers of the future over and over and over again. And it gets really demoralizing. And so the next thing I learned was write for readers, because ultimately that's the thing that's important, right? So what am I doing to please an audience? And they're the ones that get the enjoyment and the excitement out of the story that I'm telling, and they're interested in the characters. And so that's where the pleasure comes in, really, is being able to write and create that story for an audience. And that's why I've been so excited actually about all the changes in the industry with, Amazon and the ability to kind of bypass a gatekeeper and get direct feedback from the readers has been huge for me. And that's really what I strive to do. I think with science fiction, it's hard because you have ideas and you want to start with an idea, but you can't necessarily start a story with an idea. You need to start with a character who's looking at the idea, or experiencing the idea, because that's, for me at least, the character is what's going to keep people reading.
Kind of a chicken egg thing, isn't it?
Chicken egg, yeah. But all these, I'm kind of even getting ahead of myself, because I think for a new writer, just what Jenny said, you got to write. Like, find a way to write every day. Life gets in the way. You got a job, you got kids, you've got, just if you can only set aside 15 minutes and you write something, you won that day. You accomplished something. And I think it's important to track that too. Like, a lot of people don't track their writing, and even just having a Google Doc where you just say, today I wrote 500 words, and yesterday the next day I wrote 600, and you can feel awesome about that. And just the fact that you did something, and before you know it, even if you write, everybody gets on it about like writing quickly, but the fact is, if you wrote 500 words a day, you've got a novel in a year, and people don't realize just how steady, keep on trying, keep working on it. As soon as you write, you are a writer, and don't let anybody say that you're not. Don't take a piece of work to a group. And that's the other thing. Like, as soon as you start inviting criticism, because being a writer, it means getting criticism, right? But as long as you believe in what you did and you're trying to do your best and you're telling a story, you're going to 12 people are going to read that story, and you might have 8 people that hate it, 2 people that are ambivalent, and 2 people that love it. Those 2 people are your audience, right, for them. And you don't want to please everybody. You want to find your audience and please them, because otherwise you'll just be killing yourself. And you'll find yourself writing for the people who criticize you the most. And that is that, like, I criticize myself more than anybody else can, but I would find myself doing that because it would just chew at me, and they would criticize or nitpick dumb little things, or, well, this has already been done, or so-and-so did this better, or haven't you read this person? Like, well, shut up. This person over here liked it. I'm going to write more stories for them, but I can say that now because I've been banging my head against that wall for 5 years, and you reach a point where that confidence comes, but it all starts with writing and just telling that story and finding that ideal reader,
That's, you guys have, go ahead, Jenny.
I just want to say one more thing is to write for the love of writing as well. Because if you write because you want, like James says, because you want other people's approval for your writing, or if you want to win an award, or if you want to become a full-time writer, or if you want to earn loads and loads of money, the minute that you don't attain that goal, it's going to put you off writing. It's going to stop you. So you should just write because you love to write, and keep your mind focused on that. And then you won't be deterred when things don't come as easily as, I've been going 3 years, and only now have I just now started to reach a level where I can start to let my other work go. That's taken me 3 years of reading stories of other people's success, where they wrote one book and suddenly they were a millionaire. But you don't read the 999 stories of people who wrote a book, published it, and then it didn't sell, and so they gave up.
Right.
Yeah.
So just write for the love of writing, to keep going.
And that's what we're all doing with Aeon 14. Is there's stories we want to tell. That's the number one thing.
Yep.
The thing that you guys all have fantastic advice, and it really does all come down to the one piece of advice. If people say, what's the one piece of advice you give to a new writer? I say, write every day, no matter what. And it is a muscle. And the thing is, a lot of people think of writing, they're like, well, I'm going to write my very first book is going to be amazing. It's like, okay, what if I told you to build me a dining room table? Would your very first dining room table be amazing? And do you think that any master carpenter's very first dining room table was amazing? You say, I want to be an amazing florist. I want to make the most amazing floral arrangements, and I want to seed the gardens at Buckingham Palace or something like that. Do you think that the very first time that someone who does that kind of work did amazing work and it was perfect? And no, it was awful. They mix up they got the wrong plants in there, or the carpenter couldn't get this right, and there was gaps and stuff like that, and the thing was wobbly. And it's practice. You have to practice these things.
Yeah.
Stephen King has a book called On Writing, and in On Writing, he says that you're not really good at writing. You haven't learned that much at writing until you've written 1 million words. And 1 million words is about 10 350-page novels. I think he says at that point you're a journeyman writer. Is what he refers to it as. And that's a lot of books. If you think about most authors in the traditionally published world never get that many books out. That's actually pretty rare. And you going to say something, Lisa? Yeah,
I just to play off of what you just said, when you said about writing every day, that's one thing, I may look like, a new author, and this is my first book, and Alpha Centauri was, a great, made it number 10 and Amazon science fiction bestseller, and James's Lissa's Dream went, gangbusters. But what you just heard us all say is Jenny is a writer for Colgate. James has a journalism degree, and he was a reporter, and he wrote. I wrote for Lumina Media for years and years and years before, as a freelancer, and I've written scripts. I mean, so all of us have years of background of kind of that funnels up to the book of doing exactly what you just said, which is building that muscle and practicing it and working at it.
Yep. Yeah, and we're going through that journey where you learn you learn who your audience is depending on what you're writing.
Yeah, there's no instant success.
Mm-hmm. For example, with what Jenny's doing with Colgate, for example, she's writing what they want.
Right, exactly.
And getting them to agree that it's the correct article will be what she's doing. I mean, obviously, it has to please the end user. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep you doing it for 5 years. But the other thing is and tied into that is what I call revisionitis. And I think everybody who started writing a book did this, where you write part of the book and you get going, and then you sort of stall out. Maybe you hit writer's block, or you don't have an idea for what comes next, and you start going back and rereading and revising, and you can do that forever. You can revise that book until the end of time. And what I do when I write is I never look back. I always only write forward. If I think of things I need to do later, I make a note. I use Word. I just drop notes in the margin. I just highlight anything. I highlight the word I'm currently typing, highlight it, make a note. I need to go back and fix XYZ because I just realized that I forgot about something. Some people use other tools for that, but just make a note, keep going. And that ties a lot into writing every day, because you write every day, you remember what you wrote yesterday, and you don't have to go back and reread. So you keep yourself from getting into revisionitis. Whereas if you write once a week, you're going to forget what you wrote, and you're going to have to go back and write it. And the interesting thing is a lot of the most popular books out there, like The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, I think was written in and it's one of the best-selling books of all time, was written something like 7 or 8 days. A lot of very popular books that you think are great masterpieces were actually written in a week or two. Lee Child, who's arguably one of the most successful authors in the world right now, produces 1 book a year, but he writes it in 2 weeks. Just writes the book in 2 weeks, and then does whatever for the rest of the year. I mean, the guy's living the life. But
I would add to that is finish and move on to the next thing, because I've been in groups with people that have been editing the same novel for 7 years, and I love them to death, but it gets you got to move on to the next thing, because that becomes an albatross around your neck, and you don't take what you've learned. That's the other thing too. Everything that you write, you're going to learn from that. You're not going to apply what you learned to that old manuscript. You go to apply that to the next manuscript, and maybe you just got to let that old one go and incorporate the ideas into something new.
Yeah.
But you have to live that old adage of great projects are never finished, they're abandoned.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Because you could tweak it to death.
Yeah, and you'll make it worse eventually.
Yeah.
You'll eventually suck the life.
And one thing, sometimes too, you got to realize that you are your worst. I'm my worst critic, but a reader is not going to see what you see. A reader will read it in a totally different way. They'll enjoy it. They might come back to you and say, that was great. I loved that. Whereas you're like, all I can see is everything I did wrong with that. And you just got to let that go and move on to the next thing, you know?
Yeah.
There's always going to be somebody who will criticize what you did. It could be perfect. I mean, go read the reviews on The Great Gatsby, just if you want to feel better. You know, and there are plenty of people out there that just think that's, you know, drivel. You know, whatever, go read reviews on whatever great book that you love, go read the reviews on it and sort by 1 stars, and you'll see there are plenty of people that hated it. So
yeah, absolutely. The another interesting side note is that Lee Child, for example, was a journalist, and Lee Child is actually a pseudonym. He's actually a very famous journalist and actually TV personality who cut his teeth for years on other types of writing before he started writing Jack Reacher. And there's a lot of that, you know, a lot of people that do really well. And there obviously are people that there are lightning strikes who have the perfect story at the perfect time that reaches the perfect audience. But you can't count on that, you know, and you can't beat yourself up because you didn't get hit by lightning, the right kind of lightning. That's not your fault. And that's another really important thing is don't feel guilty when you fail. Don't let feeling guilty, like, I wanted to write 10,000 words yesterday and I only wrote 7. 7,000 words is great. Or I wanted to write 1,000 words and I only wrote 700. 700 is still great. You know, everybody has a different life experience. For example, I'm ridiculously lucky in that my wife, Jill, makes it so I can write 10 hours a day without interruption. I mean, imagine what anyone could do every day if they could do something for 10 hours without interruption. You could accomplish just about anything. Which is why I'm able to get this many books out. And it's not because I alone am this superhero. It's because Jill creates this environment for me that lets me do that. Not everybody has that, you know. James is working a full-time job and is juggling a baby in one arm while he's using Dragon to try and dictate his next novel, you know. And everybody.
Well, I don't dictate the novel.
Oh, okay. Otherwise your baby crying would be in there half the time.
I know.
And you would just be saying, nah.
I've tried to use dictation. It worked for some people, but I just can't. I can't do it.
Yeah, I actually can't either. But the other thing to think about, like what James said, James actually lowballed it. If you wrote 500 words a day, you would have a book in 160 days. And 500 words a day is maybe only 20 to 30 minutes of writing every day. So you could, rough draft wise at least, you could produce 2 rough drafts a year by working 20 to 30 minutes a day. And so if you think about it, then you say to yourself, well, why is my favorite XYZ traditionally published author only get like 1 book out a year? There's a whole variety of reasons for that. To have to do more with marketing than anything else. But actually, a lot of your traditionally published authors are using pseudonyms and are actually writing 10 to 15 books a year. You just don't know.
Something I learned from my group that was really funny. So a lot of well-known, within science fiction, I mean, we've got 3 authors that have won many awards. They all wrote continuously. The other thing was, like, they're all broke, but they were like, so trying to write, like, one of the big jokes, we were at a dinner once and they were talking about, they had discovered some condom company that was paying people to write stories that included condoms. And so they all were writing novels for this company and getting paid for them. They didn't end up getting published, but they all like, so they were always like, in addition to the, you know, the genre work they were doing, they were still finding ways to get paid. So constantly writing, you know, so the writing never stops. You've always got something in the mail. It's just only certain things are getting published, right? Or you're going to only get paid for certain things.
Yeah.
So that's always just a misnomer. I think, is it Nora Roberts that actually writes something like 12 books or maybe 8 books a year? It's just, they can't keep up with her output.
Yeah.
So
there's stuff like that. And for, you know, if you think about it, like I actually don't write 10 hours a day, obviously, because you guys know I'm on Facebook half the time chatting with all the folks. But like if I were to actually write 10,000 words a day, I would be producing myself a full novel every 2 weeks easily. And that's working 10 hours a day, which is not, and I have no commute. So that's not much longer than most everybody else who's listening to this works every day. You're all probably with an 8-hour work day and an hour commute and stuff like that. You're working just as much as I am. And if you were doing that exclusively writing novels, you would be producing a novel every 2 or 3 weeks. And it wouldn't actually be that hard. It's sort of just this. And the crazy thing is, the faster you write a novel, the better it is, because you don't forget stuff that you did at the beginning of the novel. I can remember, you know, in chapter 2, I put Chekhov's gun on the mantle and I know I need to use it in chapter 4 or something like that, or 7. Whereas if you wrote a novel over the course of a year, you forget that stuff. And when you get to the end, the thing has no continuity and you've got to go back and do this heavy edit on it, which you don't have to do if you write the novel quickly. Right. And I'm James is I don't think you're, with everything you've written, you've definitely done over 1 million words now, but you're 500,000 words in the Lyssa series now. And in sort of an old school mindset where a lot of old school authors only ever got to write like 5 to 10 novels, just the way the publishing industry works. If you don't keep moving up, you move out. And so James has now written half a career worth of science fiction novels in a year. And you get better as you do that. You know, I'm writing now. I'm writing an entire career every 6 months worth of novels, and that helps a lot in getting the skill down and getting better at it. Just like for example, I build reclaimed furniture out of reclaimed wood, and my first table took me, I don't know how long it took me to make my first table. It was a couple of months. And I actually did the finish wrong, and I mixed up 2 different types of finishes that I shouldn't, and the finish bubbled, and I had to re-scrape the whole top of the table down and stuff like that. It was a disaster. And now I can build a table in 2 days, and it's way nicer than the 2-month table was. It's going to be a really nice table, and I can do it in 2 days. So, 2 days back to back, because gluing time and drying time and stuff takes longer with the table, but you get the idea. And it's that, you know, mastering your craft will make it better. So that's sort of out there, because some people think that a series written as fast as Aeon 14 can't be a quality series, but I believe that actually doing it quickly with an eye to quality in there, which you can see through the process we use, does make the whole thing better. So that's what gets you guys what's going to look like for the foreseeable future: 50 books a year, 40 to 50 books a year about this stuff. So it's pretty awesome that that we live in a time, like James said, where we don't have these gatekeepers anymore saying, no, you can't produce something like Aeon 14. No, we can, and people are liking it.
I know. And with every new book, there's more critical mass, and it just keeps growing, which is exciting to me as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we've is anybody else want to add anything? Or, I mean, this could be a whole other show, quite honestly. I mean,
could be, yeah.
Like that, I think each of us has our journey to get where we've gotten. And the thing is, the journey continues. And I don't think any of us are in this like for short-term gains. So I would love to be I could talk about this, and I want to be talking about it 5-10 years from now. So, but I think we'll need to wrap things up. This might be our longest show yet. So we might actually we'll need to narrow it down to just like one topic of discussion for the next show. But thanks to everyone for joining us. Let me pull up my notes so I actually say things correctly. Let's see. Oh, that's the opening. I shouldn't read that part. Okay. I know. So we've reached the end of our 2 hours, maybe. Obviously, we've got a lot more we could talk about, but we're going to do more of that in the future. I think this is our 6th episode. So once we get to like 10, maybe I'll start saying the number of the episode at the beginning. So I don't want to jinx things. That's the sound of me knocking on wood. But we hope you're enjoying things. If you've got feedback, you can hit us up on YouTube. You can hit us up on we're actually on iTunes now. So if you would love to take a look, or please take a look at iTunes, and reviews would help us out there as far as visibility on iTunes, or the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Aeon14 fans, and forward us to your friends. We would love to have more people in the group. The group has been really active, and it's been really great to see the articles folks have been sharing. I mean, it's just kind of becoming a great source for SF or science news, which I find really, cool. So we'll do our best to get links up of anything that we mentioned during the show, or you can also ask for follow-up questions. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the Intrepid.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.
Bye.